But Doug is a former president of the Wesley Homes Foundation and the Highline Community College Foundation, as well as the Des Moines Chamber of Commerce. He's active in support of the Rotary Club, Kiwanis, and Des Moines Food Bank. Doug married the woman of his dreams, who is here with us tonight, in June of '06, and together they manage many millions of dollars of assets, as well as 6 kids. Yeah, right. Forget the millions of assets, the kids. They are passionate about making a difference for Christians in Egypt. They've been over there, I know, many, many times, which includes building an orphanage and helping fund and raise $600,000 to open up a cardiac center in Alexandria, Egypt. Well, they will attend the opening on December 28th. How cool is that? This hospital is going to save thousands of lives of Christians that would not have any access to health care. Good friend of mine, good friend of Jesus's, good friend of Bellevue, good friend of the business community. And Doug, really appreciate you being with us here tonight. So come up and share a few things with us.
Well, I was pretty surprised that John asked me to speak tonight because, you know, I've spoken before, and sometimes things have gone well, and sometimes they haven't. I drive John to the Husky games, and it's a special calling from God. And when we get there 4 hours before the game starts, that's when John and I do most of our creative thinking. And we hear from God for some reason at the Husky games, and so we have these great ideas. We don't really test them out. So I think the last time I spoke to the Redmond Club, I was wearing a garden hose talking about pumpkin seeds. So I thought it was quite a risk of John to actually have me speak to all of you. So really, John, I'm honored. He gave me a card before I came up here. It was probably something about thanking me, but he wanted me to read it for some reason before I spoke. It says the following speaker may or may not represent the views of Liberty Road and I guess that means I can speak about whatever I want.
There you go.
I want to talk tonight about the silent S. For some reason, I have this strange relationship with the letter S. My wife's name is Susie. I drive the S curves every day. And before it was a little too late before I found out that Pastor John is a Swede. And I work in Des Moines. Now Des Moines actually has 2 S's. Have you ever wondered why words have letters that you don't pronounce? There are reasons. So if you decide to look it up, when they add silent letters to the word, it helps reshape the character of the word, and it helps change how the other letters are pronounced, and I will come back to that later. I'm sitting there, shivering, but I'm sitting there in New York. I'm at the Seahawks game. The blue and green colors at night are kind of muted, so you look out in the stadium, and all I thought I saw was orange. The #1 offense in the country. It was amazing. How did I even get there? I don't have Seahawks season tickets. I had to convince the other S, Susie. I said, honey, how am I going to convince her? Because the price is ridiculous, right? It's not. How do you explain it? I had to find it. I said, honey. So I found it once in a lifetime. Honey, this happens once. I could die before this happens. And so that's how I got myself there. We won. Somehow in New York, if someone else had a Seahawk jersey on, they were my best friend. The Empire State Building had the Husky colors, and it was. The taste of success was an amazing feeling. At one point in my life, I felt that success, that was going to be my way out. Because for most of my life, I had just been trying to survive. In 8th grade, I heard the words, "Good job, son. I'm proud of you." That wasn't from my dad. It was from my wrestling coach. I had won the 8th grade championship in Billings, Montana. I remember getting my first A on my science paper. I got C's and D's in grade school, just felt terrible about myself. And I remember getting an A and not knowing why. I went up to the teacher and he said, "Well, you put some extra effort into it. Great job, son." I had an alcoholic father and 2 abusive stepdads. So what I learned was, I guess that way to add value or to be okay, to get a little bit of praise, was through achievement and effort. So that began my journey of striving to be successful. I was never the best. In fact, the 8th grade championship, that was the only time I think I took first place. And I was so proud of myself, because you know what? I hadn't hit puberty yet. And the guy I beat had hair under his arms. I thought, I am David, and I have just slain Goliath. I took 2nd in state, wrestling champion. 2nd's fine. Our firm of 14,000, at one point, I was number 3 in the entire firm as far as, different ways that they measure. I thought, man, this is it. The success road it just tastes sweet. I guess I had this vision of I observed people, and there was a couple of different types of success. I wasn't quite sure which one was me. One was like the jar of Skippy peanut butter, just sweet, cool, tan. And whenever that peanut butter is involved with something, it's the top dog. Goes on a piece of bread, you are the top dog. If you're hanging out with jelly, your name goes first. Peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And even if you're hanging out with sophisticated chocolate, it's called a Reese's peanut butter cup. Other way, I thought, well, education, sophistication. I did get my college degree, I got a graduate degree. Grey Poupon, a sophisticated mustard. You are the top mustard in the room. What's interesting as I kept going back to these success conferences is something was happening. It wasn't fulfilling. It was like it was a little bit disillusioned. The problem with success is, it can be demanding, and once the goal is reached, it's not motivating. And a lot of times it involves beating somebody else. I had to earn my way to get into this by beating somebody else. It didn't seem like there was an ability to rest. I had to focus on myself. So that's where, if wealth, achievement, and status was going to be that absolutely fulfilling road, something must have been wrong with me. Something must be wrong with me. So that's one thing. If I'm struggling with something after succeeding, what's the opposite of succeeding when you're trying to win? Losing. Now, if you think it was a sales job the first time, how do you tell your wife that the once-in-a-lifetime game, sometimes lightning strikes tight, and I need to go to Arizona to the Patriots Super Bowl game? Well, I did. And that's where, as you all know, I had my Skittles ready, I could taste it. I was ready to have that taste of success again. It was 1 yard short. That was so painful. It was just like gut-wrenchingly painful. So we know the other side of success is someone has to lose, and the pain of losing, it's very impactful. What I also learned, and you know too, that success in one area does not guarantee success in other areas. I was having issues with my marriage, and some of the kids were struggling. And so that's where, again, some of you may have had issues with business, so the same rules that applied to how you become successful didn't seem to be working in the other areas of my life. But I wondered if it was just me. If I could be one of those men on the field, oh man, I would have made it. A lot of us guys think that way. What's interesting is college NCAA athletes, when they were surveyed the likely of playing professionally, NCAA hockey, 60% of the men that are playing hockey think they're going to be going into professional sports. Women's NCAA Division I basketball, a little bit more regional, 45%. And men's divisional basketball, 75% of the men playing college basketball, you bet I'm going to be a pro. What's the actual number? 1%. So if success is that road that I have to get to, does that mean everyone else is a loser? But if I could get to that 1%, but if I could get there, they must have it made. They're very, and yet what's interesting is athletes lose their money at an alarming rate. 60% of the NBA players, if you can believe this, think about how much they make, are broke within 5 years of retirement. Football players, even worse. 5 years after whoever your favorite NFL star is, 78% have filed for bankruptcy. Major League Baseball players, 4 times the average bankruptcy rate than the average person. As I did some research, I came across an article talking about climbing the ladder of success and talking about the crisis at the summit, approaching this goal you've set, plateauing and descending. And it can be so destructive in our lives if that's how we define who we are. You have internal symptoms of discontent and loss of enthusiasm and cynicism. It also can manifest in our lives as far as serious distractions, working harder to accomplish the same thing, unorthodox career choices, substance abuse, other discretions and issues, all with this misguided effort that success needs to define my life. So what was pulling on me was a strong and stronger feeling that there had to be something else. Bob Buford wrote a book called Halftime. He talked about this pulling on us. A healthy desire to be successful, he says, can have many positive benefits. But on our way to becoming successful, we pick up signals that tell us that success is not enough. One of the most common characteristics of a person, he says, is nearing the end of the first half is that unquenchable desire to move from success to significance. There's that silent S, talked about significance. John Maxwell, a top leadership speaker in the country, says that every person has a longing to be significant, to make a contribution, to be part of something noble and purposeful. He goes on to say that with success, my motives may be selfish. With significance, my motives cannot be selfish. Success asks, how can I add value to myself? Significance asks, how can I add value to others? If I pursue success, my joy is the result of my success. If I pursue significance, my joy is the result of others' success. With success, my influence is limited. With significance, my influence is unlimited. Success can last a lifetime, but significance can last several lifetimes. I know a lot of people, this is Maxwell speaking still, I know a lot of people who believe they are successful because they have everything they want. They have added value to themselves. But I believe significance comes when you add value to others, and you can't have true success without significance. Again, that's John Maxwell. Another great book that John introduced me to is called The Generosity Factor by Ken Blanchard. He has this chart. There's success and wealth and achievement and status on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, significance, generosity, you heard that tonight, service, relationships. He says in his book, now again, it's about this wise, significant business person versus the young, brash success guy who cannot figure him out. And they're having this discussion. And he says the success-motivated person tends to measure his or her life in terms of money, power, status, achievement, and in recognition. The significant person places emphasis on a more spiritual view of life, generosity, empowerment of others, service, building up others, and helping them develop solid relationships. The successful person has learned how to make money, but the significant person has learned how to give it away. How to be generous, to share the blessings of money with those who are in need and those who need help in a variety of social and humanitarian needs. The successful person has achieved great things, sadly sometimes at the expense of others. He or she is proud of what has already been accomplished. The significant person understands that the greatest thing one can accomplish is to serve others and to help them achieve their goals. Finally, the successful person may have attained a measure of status. Others look up to them and may even see them as a role model. They often discover later that those who have become our role models have let us down. Turns out to be something less than we had hoped or expected. He concludes by saying, giving resources is one form of generosity, serving others is another, fostering meaningful relationships is yet another. It all comes down to 4 things that all of us contain: time, talent, treasure, and touch. If you think about that, some of us have time to give. We may not have much money, but we have time to volunteer. What are the talents that you have? The gifts. Treasure, our money. And others would be touch. It has many meanings of what touch could be. Influence, could be just mentoring. So that's where all of us have something that we can give. Doug, that's very nice. It sounds very nice. It's something much to inspire to, but is it really practical? The business world is a dog-eat-dog world. You know, if I work hard and I chase success and I have extra, maybe I'll try to be significant, but is it really practical to the business world being significant? Let's talk about that. The life expectancy of a Fortune 500 company now is 15 years. 88% of the companies that existed in 1955 are gone. E.F. Hutton, RCA's Woolworth, WorldCom, Eastern Airlines Compact Computer, Polaroid, Circuit City, Borders Bookstore, Blockbuster Video, Remington typewriters, Sony Ericsson phones. 30 years ago, a gentleman named Peter Drucker revolutionized the business world. The thought in the MBA schools was, businesses exist to make a profit. Bottom line, you don't make a profit, you're out, so therefore they exist to make a profit. Peter Drucker challenged that. He goes, our mission is to serve the customer, is to add value to customers. If we do that, we'll make a profit. That sounds so simple today, but back then, again, it was revolutionary. Jim Collins, top guru who wrote the book, Built to Last, Good to Great, studied the companies that last. What is different about them? A couple of their conclusions: they made their customers central to their ideology. They made concerns for their employees central to their ideologies. Goes on to say, you cannot instill new core values or purpose in people. Core values, purpose are not something people buy into. People must already have a disposition to holding them. So what they're talking about is companies that last longer have a unique vision and core values that are people-focused. And that's where the products are going to change. They don't have the perfect idea. They got something in their DNA that's where stands the test of time. Inc. magazine came out with research and talked about the purpose index. It reveals that 28% of employees are driven by purpose, by significance versus success. Their focus is serving others, as opposed to the 72% that are motivated by status, achievement, and income. The conclusion was that if you're one of that 28%, you make just as much or more than the other employee, but you're much more fulfilled at work, you do better work and get higher evaluations, you have much longer tenure in the company, you're bigger fans of the company, and you're much more likely to become leaders. She goes on to say, is that The conclusion they made is making money is not an empowering vision. The goal realized is no longer motivating, and that we're made to be and to do something significant. It says our whole lives, not just the first 2/3, there is something for everyone to chase that will get them out of their bed every day that is bigger than making money. So this is Inc. magazine. The bottom line is this. There is a new war brewing for a very different kind of talent. Purpose-oriented people. And companies are scrambling to figure out how to develop hiring mechanisms to hire these people. Now this is the part that I would just like to run up and down, but Caroline said, don't leave your space here because we're videos. I'm stuck at this podium here. But what they're saying is, does being significant apply to the business world? And now we're having the business world recognize? Are you kidding me? Companies that at last have something that's there that focuses on significance, focuses on the lives of others. It's not the product. It's not that you have the best product. You move and adjust and products change. And now they're saying businesses are looking for a mechanism. How do we attract significant employees rather than successful? Holy moly. Are there any employees in here? I mean, that's where when you go on a job interview, I mean, take this article and say, you know what? Why should we hire you? Because I focus on significance. I mean, that's really interesting. And that's where, what they're also saying too is that they don't have that in them, they don't often change. So that's where, if you have an employee that's thinking differently, you know, maybe they shouldn't be with my company. Now that's employees. We're talking about employees can make the difference to whether a company exceeds or doesn't. Now what about leadership? In his first book, Built to Last, Jim Collins, the business guru, said, we have found nothing significant about leadership. We don't think leadership makes a difference. They were looking at leaders that were charismatic and all this, you know, and that doesn't make any difference. They still go under. They came back with the second book and said, we missed something. It seems that, it says here, that Jim Collins spent more time writing about humble leaders than any other topic. He found that great leaders desire for others to be recognized. A great leader loses his or her greatness when it becomes all about that leader. In almost a biblical sense, greatness comes when those who could first decide to be last. We found, this is Jim Collins talking, we found that for leaders to make something great, their ambition has to be for the greatness of the work and the company, rather for themselves. Consider the idea that charisma can be as much of a liability as an asset. Your strength of personality can sow seeds of problems. He calls it level 5 leadership. He doesn't use the word significant, but that's what he's talking about. They channel their ego needs away from themselves into the larger goal of building a great company. It's not that level 5 leaders don't have ego or self-interest. Indeed, they're incredibly ambitious, but their ambition is first and foremost for the institution, not themselves. They have a duality. They're modest and willful, humble and fearless. Talking about level 5 leadership, and we know that's called significance. Now, aren't we lucky? Aren't we so lucky that these businessmen discovered this truth? Well, if it wasn't for them, we never would have known about this treasure. But of course, that's not true, is it? They stumbled across something that we've known started from the beginning of when we were made. Well, where does this come from? How about let's try Psalm 139. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How will I know it? You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion. As I was woven together in the dark of the womb, you saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. So first of all, rather than me trying to find fulfillment by trying to achieve something, it's saying you're valuable for just who you are. You're God's workmanship. Now the Greek for workmanship, I think is pronounced poetis, which means it comes like poem, like poet, an unbelievable, masterful work of art. That's who we are. And so we start with that. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration, he talks about what keeps those alive and which ones didn't make it. And he talks about if we're in a society where you have to be successful to add value, if you carry that to an extreme, like they did in Germany, it says here, it blurs the difference between the decisive difference of being value if you're useful. When you lost your usefulness, they called it, in Hitler's program, they called it mercy killing. All of those who have lost their social usefulness because of old age, incurable illnesses, mental deterioration, whatever handicap they had to suffer. So that's where, again, we are valuable for who we are. And some of the folks that we work with Liberty Road, they don't feel that significance. They may not be useful as people value that, but they're worth our effort, they're worth our love. They have dignity because God has made them. So what are we to do about this? In Ephesians, it says, God made us what we are. In Christ Jesus, God made us to do good works, which God has planned in advance for us to do. Another version says, we are His workmanship. There's that same word. I've made you for a purpose, and it's to do good works I have planned in advance. I already know what I want you to do. The older we get, and the more that we step on rakes and holes and experience, we think, I think I'm disqualified. Because, you can be disqualified on the path of success. Michigan and Wisconsin have been disqualified for the Final Four. Good, maybe next year, but in the track as a sex year, you're disqualified. So that's where even Paul, looking at his weaknesses, said, I asked God 3 times, can you take this away from me? I've got some flaws here, can you fix this? And the response was, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. That's not the voice that the success wants to talk about. So Rick Warren, in his book, The Purpose-Driven Life, he talks about every one of us has a unique shape. S-H-A-P-E. We have unique spiritual gifts that He's given us. We have a heart, we have a passion for things. We don't even always understand why. We have abilities. You can improve your ability. Anyone here ever taken Strength Finder?
Yes.
A lot of these things, it's just part of who we are. Susie has completely different strengths than I have, and that's where, I'm the dreamer. I release all these ideas, these nonsensical helium balloon ideas up in the air, and her job is to knock them out of the sky if they're not practical. It works perfect, really. So that's where, because her gift is logical. Mine's called futuristic. Abilities, personality. We all have a different personality, and we have a different experience. So how much of those 5 things do we really have control over? Some of that, but part of that's just the way that God's designed. We all have a unique shape. And we all think that being significant sometimes is doing some great thing. Oh my gosh, if I could just get here and get better off and less and that's not true. When the Son of Man comes in His glory and all the angels are with Him, King says to those at His right, come, all you who are blessed, be my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world. For I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and you invited me to your home. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you cared for me. I was in prison and you visited me. The righteous one said, when did we ever see you hungry, Lord? Or feed you, or thirsty, or give you something to drink? Or a stranger and show you hospitality, or naked and give you clothing? When did we ever see you sick and in prison and visit you? And the king will say, I tell you the truth, when you did it for the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me. Rick Warren says, what matters is not the duration of your life, but the donation of it. Not how long you live, but how you've lived. So if you're one of those folks that, man, I have made some mistakes in my life, my business, my marriage, with everything, I'm disqualified to be, God had some plan, I'm sure and he says, if you're not involved in any service or ministry, what excuse have you been using? If you're going to use that excuse, here's what he says. Abraham was old. Jacob was insecure. Leah was unattractive. Joseph was abused. Moses stuttered. Gideon was poor. Samson was codependent. Rahab was immoral. David had an affair and all kinds of family problems. Elijah was suicidal. Jeremiah was depressed. Jonah was reluctant. Naomi was a widow. John the Baptist was eccentric. I think he ate grasshoppers, to say the least. And Peter was impulsive and hot-tempered. Martha worried a lot. The Samaritan woman had several failed marriages. Zacchaeus was unpopular. Thomas had doubts. Paul had poor health. Timothy was timid. So what I've learned on this journey was that the road to significance was the road that God was nudging me to, the one He was pushing me to. And I didn't need to have this success label. I didn't need to be Skippy Peanut Butter. I didn't need to be Grape Poupon. I didn't need to have this facade that everything was okay. Some of you have heard this before, but one of my favorite stories is in 2 Kings 4. The widow of a member of a group of prophets came to Elijah and called out, said, "My husband who served you is dead, and feared the Lord, but now a creditor has come threatening to take my 2 sons as slaves." "How can I help you?" Elisha said. "Tell me what you have in the house." "I got nothing except for a small flask of olive oil." "Borrow as many empty jars as you can from your friends and neighbors. Then go into your house with your door behind you, pour olive oil from your flask into the jars, setting each one aside when it's filled." And she did. Her son kept bringing her jar after jar, and she filled one after another. Soon every container was full. "There's no more," they said, and the olive oil stopped flowing. "Now sell the olive oil and pay your debts to you and your sons." And I felt like God was speaking to me is that I just need you to be that empty, transparent, open container. I can't use you if you're full of peanut butter. That's where when we use up something in the house, whether it's mayonnaise or peanut butter or whatever is in the, what do we do with empty jars? Yeah. Well, whatever you had, we used it up. Try again. We're going to crush it. Make something else. Thanks for showing. That's that road to success. So yeah, you were hot for a while, Mr. Peanut Butter, but you are all used up. You know? And that's where, what I love about this story is the vessel that God used to bless this person, to bring her sons out of, with simple, transparent, empty jars. And that's where, if that's all we are, and we all have our unique shape, and my failures and my shortcomings don't limit me, but actually, as God said, He can show His grace. He can see inside me, and that's where, wow, that's exciting. Back to what I have to offer as far as generosity, time, talent, treasure, and touch. The Good Samaritan story, you've all heard that. Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho. He's attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes and beat him up and left him half dead by the road. Now, chief priest came along, crossed the other side of the road. Temple assistant walked to the other side and didn't help him. We're going to leave those guys alone. Maybe they were pursuing success, I'm not sure. But a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. He put the man on his donkey, took him to an inn, took care of him. The next day he handed to the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, "Take care of this man. If his bills runs higher, I'll take care of it." One of the ways that if we stay open to God's leading, he didn't have his significance hat on. "We ought to be significant today." He's probably going to a business meeting. And yet, he kept his eyes open and saw a need. But he allowed such capacity in his life that he went over, and did he not touch him? Bandaged his wounds. He had some sort of a skill set there. I couldn't do that because I don't have a first aid kit in my backpack, so right there I'd be out. He got the man on his donkey, took him to the inn. He spent a day with him. He had time. He had the talent to manage him up. He had the experience, and he had the money. It's a perfect example of a man that allows capacity in his life. And he was able to, by himself, help this man. Think about the needs that we have in our society. Some of them are pretty complicated. And that's why Liberty Road. I mean, if I see an opportunity, but quite often that situation is not just staring at me on my long commute to work, on the S-curves. So that's why Liberty Road partners with these amazing organizations. What does New Horizons do? They partner with youth to exit street life. I don't have the skill set to do that. Urban Impact, partnering with families and communities to break the cycle of social, material, and spiritual poverty. Sounds like several steps in that. Matt Talbot serves the homeless, the addicted, the mentally ill. The mission is to restore participants to healthy lives and to encourage them to take responsibility for their actions. That involves a number of different skill sets and steps. Olive Crest, dedicated to preventing child abuse, to treating and educating at-risk children and preserving the family one life at a time. Julie Reach, transforming lives and communities one student at a time. So that's where we come down to, and it's on your tables there, you come down like in the middle, that Liberty Road vision and mission. It all kind of makes sense now. Liberty Road Foundation will transform the business community? What does that mean? We now know. I can become a significant company. I can be a significant employee, and I can be a significant leader. And these other magical business leaders are saying that is the difference between who is making it a business and who isn't. Wow, is that a powerful concept? But it's action, it involves action. That's why they use the word mobilizing. To restore hope and dignity and significance. Well, that first step is hope. We define the word dignity. I don't need to be useful. I may not feel useful at all in my current state, but I am a worthy person. And I, as this person who's having problems right now, I also have a calling from God. That's why the following step of restoring dignity is significance. I'm going to use my experiences and my failures to bless others. The key is action. So that's where what I would like to do is, you could get this on Amazon, but there's a sort of a shortcut to becoming significant. I didn't know this. It took me a long time, but we found a shortcut, and that's where it's been right in front of you the whole time. How do we want to do this? Because if you will take off, remove the lantern, yes, and open up take the cloth off. I have for all of you significance jars. Now there are different shapes and sizes. You want to grab a jar that reflects your personality. So I need each of you to grab your jar at this table. I'm not saying it is. You have to grab your jar. And I need you to screw the lid off. Some action steps here. All right. Everybody ready? Anybody have any trouble getting your lid off? All right. So as you hold this jar, this represents this portion of my life and my commitment that I'm going to dedicate a certain part of my year 2017 to being significant. I'm going to be transparent, and I'm going to accept my shape, and I'm going to recognize that my shape does not disqualify me. That's step number one. Number two, there's a table captains. You've got a special card, a special laminated card. Can you hand those out to everybody, please? On the one side, it has shape. So what I would ask you to do, as I have to do too, is take some time to reflect. on the silent S. And to take the time to look at what your shape is. And that's going to give you a guide as to how God wants to use you this upcoming year. So take a look at that and think about that. And then on the other side of the card is what 4 ways this particular year, maybe not last year, but this year, how am I going to respond here? So that's where I need to reflect a little bit. But then I have to be purposeful. The one thing about an empty jar is if you took just an empty jar without lid and you just put it on the kitchen counter, what would happen to it? It could get recycled, right? But also what could happen is it could turn into, like I have, where the change from work goes in it. And it could be something that holds pencils. So one of the things that keeps us from having the capacity to use those 4 T's is busyness. We call it the whirlwind. One thing I need to do is prune. I need to prune out things out of my life to create capacity for time and money and energy. I will confess to you that a month ago, I had 2,000 emails on my phone. It wasn't like I wanted them on there. And I was deleting like 20 a day, but I just kept jumping on. Things I had clicked on, and that's where I hadn't been unsubscribing. And so I worked for weeks to, even now, I'm sure I got 10 new ones on my phone while I've been talking here. So that's where busyness and good things that people think you should do, it fills up our lives. So the symbolic part of this jar is I do some reflection. I think about what I want to do to be purposeful this year. I can put that card in my wallet, or you can put that card in the jar. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to screw the lid back on. And I'm going to protect that part of my life that God wants to use with me. So that's where, again, my hope would be in sort of a fun way, that this could be sort of symbolic of what has God asked me to do this year. Because Certificate Road is not noisy. And I'm sure if you run into Pastor John, he'll say, hey, what's in your jar? Which means, how could you partner with Liberty Road this year? What is God telling you to work on this year? And one quick story more about my wife than myself. As she and I have been working through this, of the 14,000 financial advisors, she's the #1 performing diversity woman in the firm. So she's successful. They asked her to go to Colorado to speak to all the top people in Colorado, and they asked her to speak at a conference for all of the firm's women. They were waiting for the success talk, but they got a talk on significance instead. And she showed them the orphan girls. The orphan girls was something that we didn't even plan on. And that's where you're right. That's where heart disease is the greatest killer in Egypt. And in January, there's a young girl that emailed a doctor that she works with, said, I'm going to die of heart disease. I'm 12 years old, and the hospital has a 3-year waiting period. This hospital is going to be opened up based upon her efforts. She'll be the first one. And that, to me, any kind of success that I could pales in comparison to that accomplishment there. My crisis at work, trying to measure myself according to what ranking I was in the firm, God opened up an opportunity for me to be a leader out here, as Barry talked about, and God's made it very clear to me in 2017, my job is to lead our firm in promoting women and diversity leaders. I believe I can make a difference in this firm by focusing on what God told me, and that's where, again, we have to be successful, but that's His focus for me. So I wish you all the success you can handle. Thank you.